1, 2, 3, Johnny caught a flea. Did you get a chance to check out my video showing how to play that game? It is a great song for teaching rhythm and melody. And today I'd like to show you how. Let's start with rhythm.
Johnny caught a flea. Flea died. Johnny cried. Tee-hee.
I like to use Johnny Caught a Flea as a late practice for ta rest, where kids get a chance to compose using ta rest. So first of all, I've talked about my worksheets before. I like to make my own worksheets, and this one is two-sided, the way that I use it with the kiddos, but this is a worksheet we're going to work on in just a moment. I also use these packets that you can get on Amazon. It's called Pocket Pro, and inside you can put anything you want. And inside this one, I put a piece of paper with just 16 hearts so that you can draw rhythms on beats. You can have them draw anything you want, and it's on a plastic packet that you can end up having them. I couldn't find my eraser. Just have them get a rag of some sort. Our school has a bunch of extra rags that I'm allowed to use. I just grabbed 30 of them, so each kid has a rag, and you need a packet with a paper in it, a marker, and an eraser. But when we do worksheets, I hand them a paper, they go get a clipboard and a pencil and bring it back to their spot. Of course, the first thing that they do is write their name up at the very top. The first step on the worksheet is I have ta, ti, rest to remind people how to draw it. A ta is one line, a ti is two lines and a beam, and a rest is drawn Z and C. That's how I have students draw a rest, with a Z and a C. A really good review to get started. And instead of writing the entire rhythm of Johnny Caught a Flea, we are going to do 4 different motives from different songs with a rest in it. So I start off with, repeat after me, 1, 2, 3, and they have to hide that in their head. Do the rhythm in the head. That's with a ta and the ti and the rest. Here we go. Say it out loud, ta, 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 rest. And they write that down, ta, 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 rest. And the rest is a Z and a C. I drew it a little fast, but that's how we draw it, is a Z and a C, not just a Z. I do it the slightly more complicated way. Then the second motive, I'll use a different song. Naughty kitty cat. Would you hide that in your head? We go through the entire derivation process, which is sing the motive, hide the motive in your head, then hide the rhythm in your head, then say the rhythm out loud. It takes 4 steps, and they write down ti, 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 tom, rest. Let's do the third motive. Wolf, are you there? I wonder if you even know that. It goes, we are dancing in the forest while the wolf is far away. Who knows what will happen to us if he finds us at our play? Wolf, are you there? Yes, but I'm brushing my teeth. Or at the end, yes, and I'm coming to eat you. And they run through the forest and they tag a bunch of kids. Watch out on this channel. Maybe next year I'll get to that fun game. Wolf, are you there? Ends up being derived as ta, rest. Ti, ti, ta. And then we can also do peas porridge hot. Let's try that. Peas porridge hot. Do you know the song? Peas porridge cold, peas porridge in the pot, 9 days old. And that rhythm is derived as ta, ti, ti, ta, rest. Ta, ti, ti, ta, rest. Let's read the entire rhythm. Here we go. Ta, 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 rest. Ti, 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 ta, rest. Ta, rest. Ti, ti, ta, ta, ti, ti, ta, rest. Turn your sheet over and you'll notice that it says we compose rhythms. Well, right now they are going to draw 16 beats of rhythms using ta, ti, and rest. And I say go. and I start walking around the room, making sure that they're drawing rhythms. And we do talk about it not being boring. And all I mean by not boring is not the same rhythm 16 times, a bunch of tas. I keep saying you have to mix up the rhythms. Use tas, TTs, and rests. And after they've been doing it for a few minutes, then I will come up and I will write a rhythm and I'll say, you can't copy mine. It's copywritten and you cannot copy it. And I'll just draw this really quickly, whatever rhythm I do. T, 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 ta, ta. There's my rhythm and they all have theirs and we all do it together at the exact same time. This is a great opportunity to get out that conga drum so you can keep the beat. And here we go. Ti ti ta ta rest. Ti 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 ta ta rest. Ti ti ta ti 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 ta ta. And you can bring other students' work up, put it underneath the document camera, and have them practice someone else's rhythm. And then you go out and you get someone else's rhythm. And you may want to get one that's really interesting, maybe one that isn't as interesting, and show why. Why is this not as interesting as this one? And you don't have to show the names. You can have it in, well, first of all, there's no name on this side of this worksheet. But even if you're not using a worksheet like this, you don't have to show names. You can zoom in enough so that people can't see names because you've just grabbed a couple of students' work. And you can show, why is this one not quite as interesting? And maybe it's because it's all tas, something like that. And this is a great way for students to compose and to look at other students' work. And now let's look at the melody.
1, 2, 3. Johnny caught a flea. Flea died. Johnny cried. Tee hee hee.
Let's look at this last part of the melody. Tee hee hee. Try that with your body. Tee hee hee. Now this is going to be a middle preparation lesson for do. Tee he is a really clear so, me, do motive. And since we're working on a staff, that's what you start to do before you're ready to present do. Before that, you're just using lyrics that are going higher or lower on a staff, or icons that are going higher or lower on a staff, using Orff instruments in the right tone set that has a do, a mi, and a so. Let's go ahead and try T, he. I actually have some icons that have a flea. I was about to call it a cute icon, but it's a flea, which is really gross. So I do tend to show this icon to the kids and say, look at this is gross. This is what a flea actually looks like. And we got to put it up on a staff. So the first thing that we need is a so clef. And I'm going to put a so clef here. The reason it's not a do clef is, of course, because this is preparation for do. We haven't learned a do clef yet. T, he, and we'd have a student come on up here and put T, he, so, me, T, he, and then I would work on this one. T, he. Is the last one the same as a me or different? Is it higher or lower? And of course it's lower. And is it lower by a little bit or by a lot? And we'll start by a little bit. T, he. No, that doesn't sound right. It's gotta be T, he. So it's not a step lower, it's a skip lower, which is a really important trait to show for do, that it's not only lower than a me, but it's lower than me by a skip. T, he, and that may be it for the lesson. You would do it with your body signs. T, he. Now, if you wanted to do this as a little later preparation, you could actually use solfa notes. So, me, and if me is on a space, our new pitch, is it a step lower or is it a skip lower? So, me, yeah, it is a skip lower. Of course, you don't have to go right there. You could try it and go, so, me, no, that doesn't sound right. It's a skip lower. So, me, Now, I happen to use just, choose, me from Ickle Ockle Blue Bottle. I have that in my series. Check it out. I happen to use Just Choose Me to present dough, but this is a great song to use also. He, so, me, and our brand new pitch is do, so, me, do. If you're using it to present do, you need to show a few different traits. That it is a skip lower. You need to teach the hand sign, which is a fist right near your belly. So, me, do. And then you need to show the do clef. So you would erase the so clef and you say, hey, we finally know that musicians actually use something called a do clef. A do clef. It's a line and two little lines, and it shows you where do goes. And you can right away erase it and show what if we were to draw it higher. Let me put the lines back on here. Instead of on the space, what if I were to move it up to the line? So, me, do. Then all of these are wrong. So, me, do. Do is actually up on line number 2. And if that's on line number 2, then the others need to also be up. And you could have a student come on up and move them up a step. If do is on a line, me is on the line above it. And if me is on a line, so is on the line above it. So, me, do. What a versatile song for teaching do. You could use it as an early preparation lesson, as a late preparation lesson, or as a presentation lesson. It has been so much fun working on Johnny Caught a Flea with you. I hope you teach this song and game to your students this week. And I'll see you next week right here in the music room. Bye-bye.
Johnny cried, he. 1, 2, 3. Johnny caught a flea. Flea died. Johnny cried, he.